I'll also be engaging our development partners towards mobilizing additional resources for the same purpose. Mr. Speaker, to support generation of adequate and affordable energy, I have allocated 12.7 billion to support the exploration of geothermal, wind, and solar resources, and 4.8 billion for the exploration and distribution of oil and gas. Mr. Speaker, to connect more Kenyans to affordable electricity, I have set aside 5.9 billion for rural electrification and connection of public facilities, 6.7 billion for last mile connectivity, 1 billion for the National Street Lighting Program, 5.5 billion Kenya shillings for Eastern Electricity Highway Project, Ethiopia-Kenya Interconnector, 1 billion for substation installation, 1 billion for installation of transformers in constituencies, 1 billion for connectivity subsidy, and 12.6 billion for Loyangalani-Suswa transmission line, land compensation, and counterpart funding, and 3.1 billion for Nairobi 220 kV ring road. Mr. Speaker, the provision of quality and relevant education and training is critical in equipping Kenyans with skills necessary for industrialization. For this reason, the government will focus on improving and expanding technical and vocational education and training institute in order to equip the youth with the relevant skills necessary for industrialization. For this reason, we have allocated 16 billion for technical institutions for recruitment of additional 2,000 technical training instructors, capitation grants, 15 new technical training institutes, curriculum development assessment, and certification centers and technical vocational training authority. We also allocated 91.1 billion to support university education and 9.6 billion for higher education loans board. Mr. Speaker, to further expand access to quality basic education, we implemented a 100% transition policy in January this year. To sustain this, I have allocated 59.4 billion for free day secondary education. In addition, I have allocated 13.4 billion for free primary education program and 4 billion for examination free waiver for all class 8 and form 4 candidates, and 2 billion for school feeding program. Further, to increase the teacher to student ratio, I have set aside 5 billion for the recruitment of additional teachers. Mr. Speaker, we need to further develop our capabilities in the area of science, technology, and innovation. Leading this drive, the government has spearheaded major ICT investments, including the expansion of fiber optic backbone infrastructure across the counties, which has facilitated reliable high-speed network and supported e-government services and innovation among businesses. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, we have further enhanced allocation to support the ICT sector and improve government service delivery. We have allocated 11.9 billion for the digital literacy program, 8.3 billion to support the ongoing construction of Konza Complex, 100 million for presidential digital talent program, 310 million for digital migration KBC. Mr. Speaker, to support service delivery by government agencies, we have set aside 300 million for single window support project and 700 million for continued rollout of IFMIS to counties. We have also consolidated all ICT equipments and licensing expenditure under the Ministry of ICT in order to facilitate better coordination of government ICT strategy and eliminate duplication. Mr. Speaker, we have taken decisive steps to care for and share with the community by enhancing support for disadvantaged. Mr. Speaker, under the National Safety Net Inua Jamii program, we have extended cash transfers to vulnerable groups, including older persons, OVCs, and persons with disability. Mr. Speaker, to further relieve the blight of less disadvantaged in the society, combat poverty, and promote equity, the National Safety Net has been enhanced as follows. 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, 17.3 billion for cash transfers to the elderly persons, and 1.2 billion for cash transfers to the persons with severe disabilities. Mr. Speaker, to further support the less fortunate families, we have set aside 1.2 billion for Children Welfare Society, 400 million for Presidential Secondary School Bursary Scheme, 4.5 billion for Kenya Anger Safety Net, and 8.5 billion for the Equalization Fund. Further, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside 35.7 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund and 2.3 billion for Affirmative Action Fund to promote equity for social development. Mr. Speaker, our resolve to empower youth, women, persons with disability, and other vulnerable groups through various initiatives, including provision of affirmative funds and reservation of public procurement opportunities, remains steadfast. Already, Mr. Speaker, we have set registrations and advisory services for these groups in 52 Huduma centers spread all over the country. The National Treasury is closely monitoring the implementation of the programs to ensure full compliance by all public entities. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to create a conducive environment for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to thrive, as they are the pillar to create jobs for our youth. Work is being done to provide funding in an efficient manner. Mr. Speaker, to support sports, culture, and arts, I have allocated 200 million for construction of Sports Academy, 300 million for the construction of ultra-modern National Library. Funding for sports, culture, and arts will be enhanced significantly with the creation of the new fund that will receive money from the taxation of betting and gaming. Mr. Speaker, since the commencement of the devolution 5 years ago, it is evident that the resources are now closer to the people. Decisions are made at the grassroots level, and public participation is a requirement at every level of government, at every level of engagement. The over 1.3 trillion that has gone to the county governments in the last 5 years has ensured uninterrupted service delivery by all the 47 counties. Mr. Speaker, in 2018-2019, we are providing to counties a further 376.4 billion, comprising a shareable revenue of 314 billion and conditional allocation amounting to 62.4 billion. The allocations in the 2018-2019 translate to 40% of most recent audit revenue, well in excess of the constitutional threshold of 15%. This will be in addition to the funds provided under CDF, the National Government Affirmative Actions Fund, which as you all know, goes to the grassroots level, in addition to the funds appropriated from the Equalization Fund. Mr. Speaker, we will be coming back to Parliament with specific projects to be funded from the Equalization Fund as soon as the Commission on Revenue Allocation developed the second policy on marginalized areas. The previous policy expired this financial year, and there was no basis to prepare appropriation for the Equalization Fund. Mr. Speaker, I wish to highlight three key challenges facing county governments. First, the shrinking county on-source revenue collection. Second, escalation of expenditure arrears, which deny local businesses the necessary capital to support growth. And third, weaknesses in public financial management, exposing county public finances to leakages and wasteful spending. Mr. Speaker, to support county government to improve revenue collection, we have finalized a policy to support the enhancement of county-owned sources of revenue. We have also prepared the County Government Revenue Raising Regulation Process Bill 2018, which provides for regulations of the process of introducing new taxes, fees, and charges by county government. This is intended to address the concerns of double taxation by goods and services moving from one county to the next, and is consistent with Article 209 of the Constitution, which prohibits revenue-raising measures which impede the movement of goods and services within Kenya. I will shortly be submitting these two documents to Parliament for consideration and approval upon Cabinet approval. Mr. Speaker, to stop the growth of expenditure arrears in counties, we have agreed with the county government that all pending bills shall be subjected to verification. Once authenticated, the arrears shall be included in the budget as a first charge on the respective county revenue funds, as required under the Public Financial Management County Government Regulations 2015. I urge county assemblies and Parliament to assist us by enforcing this agreement. Mr. Speaker, to strengthen the capacity of county government to manage public finances, human resources, as well as to monitor and evaluate county plans and conduct civil education and engage with the public, I have allocated 800 million under the World Bank sponsored Kenya Devolution Support Program, KDSP, and I intend to scale up this allocation to 6.3 billion in the course of the year. In addition, in order to enhance public financial management skills of the county government officials, the National Treasury will intensify its training at the Kenya School of Government, including on public procurement. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to cooperate with the county governments to ensure quality, effective, and efficient service delivery to our citizens. In this context, Mr. Speaker, the government has partnered with the African Development Bank to implement a program that seeks to improve access and quality water supply and sanitation services in urban areas in Kenya in a sustainable manner. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the national government is also collaborating with the Nairobi City County in the implementation of the Nairobi Regeneration Program. Some of the activities to be undertaken under this program are first, cleaning the Nairobi River; second, issuing over 50,000 land titles to the landowners in Eastlands of Nairobi City County; third, decongesting Nairobi City by creating a mass rapid transit system and deploying high-capacity buses; fourth, decongesting Kenyatta National Hospital by providing capacity facilities under the Nairobi City County government, such as Mama Lucy, Mutuini, and Pumwani Hospital. Mr. Speaker, to support regeneration of Nairobi River, in collaboration between the national government and the Nairobi City County government, I have allocated 800 million in the budget for financial year 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, with the discovery of new minerals, we are determined to work with mining companies and communities to grow the sector, attract new investment, create jobs, and set the industry on a new path of transformation and sustainability. Mr. Speaker, to further support mining activities and geophysical mapping, I have set aside 509 million and a further 500 million respectively. Mr. Speaker, to further support development of a blue economy, I have allocated 575 million to aquaculture technology development and innovation transfers. Mr. Speaker, our strategies to revive tourism have borne fruits. Mr. Speaker, to further support tourism activities, I have allocated 1 billion to scale up to promotion of tourism, 340 million for sustaining new markets and siting booths, 380 million for capital lending to hoteliers, and 325 million for restoration of Fort Jesus. Mr. Speaker, the early oil pilot scheme has now taken off, setting Kenya on stage to join the League of Oil Exporting Countries. Like our neighbors, Kenya has the potential of harnessing many other natural resources, and this will further diversify our economy and provide the much-needed foreign exchange and job creation. It is critically important, Mr. Speaker, that we design a framework for managing these new resources in order to avoid the so-called Dutch disease. In this context, we have already completed the Sovereign Wealth Fund legislation, which will help us deal with the potential windfall of resources from the extractive sector and will also help us manage the resources responsibly for the current and future generation. We will soon be submitting this legislation to this August House after cabinet approval. Concurrently, Mr. Speaker, we are working with our private sector partners to develop the necessary infrastructure to evacuate and achieve early monetization of our crude oil resources. In this regard, work is ongoing for, one, development of the upstream facilities, which include drilling of 200 production wells and installation of the necessary oil drilling facilities to allow the flow of 60,000 to 80,000 barrels of oil per day. Second, the development of the proposed 821 kilometers crude oil pipeline from Lokichar oil field to Lamu, and 3 export facilities at Lamu. As this is commercially viable project, we plan to deliver it on a project finance basis without recourse to public debt. The government will, however, invest as a shareholder in the integrated project and will provide public sector facilitation as necessary. Mr. Speaker, the recent drought and floods that have afflicted most parts of the country and has caused the need to preserve our forests and environment. Therefore, to enhance and sustain environmental protection, flood control, and water harvesting intervention, I have allocated 7.2 billion for water resource management, 33.7 billion for water and sewerage infrastructure development, 2.9 billion for environmental management and protection, 10.9 billion for forest and water towers conservation, 8.3 billion for integrated rural development, and 2.2 billion for meteorological services. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance our capacity to handle the effect of floods and other disasters in the future, the Cabinet has approved the Disaster Risk Management Policy and Disaster Financing Strategy, as well as the Disaster Risk Management Fund. In addition, the Cabinet has also approved the National Drought Emergency Fund for timely mobilization of resources to fund intervention, mitigation, and recovery. Mr. Speaker, a key enabler for achieving the Big Four is eradication of corruption. Without vigorously addressing corruption, we will not achieve our aspiration of becoming a middle-income country with a high quality of life. It is critical, therefore, that each arm of government, the legislature, judiciary, and the executive, play its role firmly and without fear or favor. Mr. Speaker, the new constitution provides for independent institutions, commissions, and institutions dealing with governance. We have strengthened the multi-agency team, enabling them to investigate, prosecute, and recover corruptly acquired assets. Additionally, we have enhanced the oversight and the legislative role of Parliament and access to justice by allocating 36.8 billion to Parliament and 15.2 billion to the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, we have undertaken reforms to improve the public procurement and disposable system in order to effectively and efficiently manage our resources as provided for in the Constitution. These have simplified the procurement process. To enhance this further, we intend to revamp the procurement process. Firstly, we will shortly be submitting to Parliament the public procurement and asset disposal regulations. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to share some of the major highlights of the public procurement and asset disposal regulations, which provides for, one, establishment of a common user agency that will facilitate and manage the procurement of standard goods and items. This is aimed at reaping economies of scale while minimizing expenditure and having standard pricing on such items. Two, enhancement of the e-procurement platform to improve efficiency and effectiveness, accountability and transparency in the procurement process. Three, provisions to facilitate prompt payment for for performed contracts within 60 days upon proper certification of the same. Four, provision to firms that supply manufactured articles, materials, or supplies only produced or mined in Kenya to enjoy various margins of preference in procurement evaluation. Fifth, margins of preference shall also be extended to local contractors and suppliers, where Kenyans are shareholders and offering goods manufactured, assembled, mined, extracted, or grown in Kenya. To this end, all accounting officers of procuring entities are required to procure items manufactured in Kenya to embrace the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative. Where an accounting officer is unable to procure items wholly or partially manufactured in Kenya, he or she shall cause a report detailing evidence of inability to procure such items. Mr. Speaker, we intend to make procurement as transparent as possible, in line with yesterday's presidential directive on procurement processes and consistent with the provision of Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015. All accounting officers of ministries, departments, and agencies and parastatals are required to publish and publicize all procurement contracts on their website, the state portal, and tender notice boards with effect from 1st July 2018. The publication, Mr. Speaker, shall contain the following information. 1, names and designations of the Tender Evaluation Committee members. 2, the names of the contractor, supplier awarded the contract. 3, the names of directors of the awarded firms. 4, the contract price and tender sum. And finally, the contract period, including commencement and the completion period. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, all the accounting officers will be expected to share the reports on contract award to the National Treasury and the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority for publication on its website notices. This directive will enhance transparency and accountability in the public procurement and asset disposal proceedings. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we are working very closely with the key investigative agents of government, including the EACC, the National Intelligence, and the Director of Criminal Investigation, to identify and seal any loopholes that corrupt individuals may be using within the IFMIS system. Mr. Speaker, to strengthen various institutions that are mandated to fight corruption in the country, I have allocated 2.9 billion to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, 2.9 billion to the Department of Public Prosecution, 161 million to the Asset Recovery Agency, 587 million to the Financial Reporting Center, and 6.4 billion to the Criminal Investigation Services, and 5.1 billion to the Office of the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has made significant steps towards improving its anti-money laundering measures and abiding by global standards on anti-money laundering and financing of terrorism. To further tighten these measures, I propose to amend the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act to address money laundering and terrorism financing risks associated with non-face-to-face businesses and transactions. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I propose to include the SACCO Society's regulatory authorities as one of the supervisory bodies under Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act to give the authority a legal platform to monitor compliance of deposit-taking SACCOs in respect to prevention of money laundering and combating financing of terrorism. Mr. Speaker, currently there are limited criteria for assessment of applicants to acquire casino operations license. It is important that before issuance of a casino license, individuals and companies be vetted in order to adhere to the global standards on anti-money laundering measures. In this regard, I propose to introduce a legal framework that will enable the Betting Control and Licensing Board to take into account a wider criterion while undertaking fit and proper tests. Mr. Speaker, the strategic role of the state corporation in the creation of a conducive business environment and the implementation of delivery of key development priorities cannot be gainsaid. To ensure that these corporations continue to play a critical role in the delivery of our economic and social agenda, we will undertake key reforms aimed at addressing systemic weaknesses in the parastatal subsector, as well as address specific challenges facing the individual institution. Mr. Speaker, to address these challenges and align the mandate of specific corporations to the Big Four plan, We will implement specific restructuring measures, including reforming the Agricultural Finance Corporation, FC, to help deliver on the food and nutrition security. 2, merging of the Industrial and Commercial Development Corporation, ICDC, with the Industrial Development Bank and the Tourism Finance Corporation, TFC, to create the Kenya Development Bank with enhanced capacity to meet the financing requirement of key sectors. And 3, implementing initiatives to address the challenges of government investments in the banking sector. Mr. Speaker, we will also be reviewing the privatization program with a view to identifying, unlocking, and prioritizing transactions with high impact potential in the implementation of the National Development Agenda. In this regard, we seek the cooperation of key political actors, without whose support the program will not succeed. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's aviation sector has faced a steady decline over the last decade, characterized most notably by the turbulent performance of the national carrier and the loss of business by Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to other competing regional hubs. Mr. Speaker, if Kenya has to achieve its objective of being a premier aviation hub in the region, it has to begin to look at its aviation assets more strategically as key contributors to GDP. And this starts with having a world-class national airline and a world-class airport, starting with JKIA as the main gateway to the country. We will therefore be restructuring our aviation sector to enhance the competitiveness of our airline and key airports, particularly JKIA, as we position Kenya as an international, commercial, and financial hub. Mr. Speaker, we are presently in the process of establishing the National Toll Fund as a special fund to support the development of world-class national trunk roads. Key among them are the Mombasa to Malaba and Busia, as well as Lamu to Interland destination. Mr. Speaker, under the PPP program, 2 roads annuity projects have reached financial close, namely the Ngong, Kiseria, Isinya, and Kajiado, Imaroro roads. These roads will shortly progress to construction. We have also signed contracts for 6 other projects, namely the 1,050 megawatts Lamu coal plant, 3 PPP projects to deliver 105 megawatts of geothermal power at Menengai, 3 Wajir, Samatar, and Ramu Mandera Road annuity project, and 4 Kenyatta University Students Hostel project. We have also launched tenders for the Nairobi, Nakuru, Mau Summit PPP toll roads. 2, we have also launched tenders for the 2nd Nyali Bridge toll project, and 3rd Moi University Student Hostel projects. We have also launched tenders for Southeastern Kenyatta University Student Hostels, Embu University Students Hostel, and Embu University Students Hostel. In addition, we have completed contract negotiations on the Likoni cable car project at Mombasa, and we have 4 other PPP projects currently under contract negotiations under the road annuity program. Further, a pipeline of more PPP projects is under preparation. Water, solid waste, energy, ports, education, agriculture, housing, and manufacturing sector. Mr. Speaker, allow me at this stage to invite Kenya pension funds and other local institutional investors to consider PPP as a distinct assets class and to partner with the government in enhancing our country's capacity for public-private partnerships. We note that these funds have the potential to play a critical role, particularly in providing local currency financing for PPP projects, thereby significantly de-risking projects from foreign currency funded exposure. Mr. Speaker, to create a more robust framework for implementation of PPP projects, the government intends to revamp the PPP unit with the aim of speeding up the pace of project preparatory activities while being mindful of the need to ensure projects are well prepared and all considerations required by law are taken into account. In this regard, we have completed a review of the PPP ecosystem and undertaken a legal audit of the PPP Act 2013. This work informed the need for the amendments to the various statutes which are before this August House. The proposed amendment focuses on project land acquisition and reduction of the bureaucracy associated with the PPP project development. We shall also be undertaking administrative actions aimed at speeding up project turnaround. These include establishing shortlists of advisory services providers, standardizing project documents, and resourcing the capacity of PPP to deliver its mandate. Mr. Speaker, next week I shall be launching the PPP Disclosure Portal, which is an online platform through which all stakeholders can access all Kenya PPP data. This is our commitment under the Access to Information Act 2016 and a demonstration of our willingness to remain accountable to the people of Kenya for the efficient utilization of their resources for their benefit. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to implement measures and reforms aimed at further deepening and strengthening the financial sector. As a result, the Kenya financial sector has witnessed an upward growth trajectory over the last 7 years, with the proportion of the adult population having access to formal financial services increasing from 66.9% in 2013 to 75.3% in 2016. The efficiency of the financial sector has also generally been on an upward trend over the last 10 years, mainly driven by innovative financial service delivery channels introduced by the players. Similarly, financial stability has been boosted by enhanced credit risk management system as well as improved economic conditions. However, lending to the private sector and enterprises in Kenya has had a mixed results over the next 2 years. Mr. Speaker, you recall that in August 2016, the National Assembly sought to address the public concern about the high cost of credit through the Banking Amendment Act 2016, which imposed a maximum rate of interest for all types of credit offered by banks, as well as the minimum rate of interest on interest-earning deposit account. Mr. Speaker, the interest rate ceiling has contributed to the slow growth in credit to the private sector, and especially to the micro, small, and medium enterprise in the agricultural and trade sectors. Moreover, the aim of the amendments, which was to expand access to financial services and increase return on savings, has not been achieved since banks have shied away from borrowers they consider riskier and have priced above the maximum lending rate. At the same time, there have been concentration on either building non-interest earning deposit accounts or reclassifying interest earning deposit accounts to transaction accounts which do not earn interest. As a result, financial access and economic growth has been adversely impacted. In this regard, the government is putting in place a package of reforms aimed at optimizing lending to the private sector while at the same time encouraging innovation in the financial sector in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, let me detail some of the initiatives that we are undertaking to address the above challenge in our efforts to have a fair, transparent, competitive, efficient, and accessible credit market to serve the needs of our wananchi. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance access to affordable credit to micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are regarded as high-risk borrowers, the government is working jointly with the private sector and development partners to introduce the National Credit Guarantee Scheme as a policy tool to direct credit to MSME enterprises. The credit guarantee schemes will work through easing the financial constraints of medium and small enterprises and startups by enabling them to access capital. Mr. Speaker, as earlier alluded to the establishment of the Kenya Development Bank. The proposed bank is expected to play a greater role in providing long-term credit to the medium and small enterprises, and especially to support the Big Four plan. Further, Mr. Speaker, In order to increase efficiency and resolve overlap and make better use of resources to achieve economies of scale, the Cabinet has approved Biashara Kenya Fund by merging Uwezo Fund, Youth Enterprise Fund, and Women Enterprise Development Fund. The consolidation of the funds will result in a stronger institution with larger balance sheet that is better able to make the investments in technology needed in a modern financial sector and support the provision of long-term finance that the micro and medium enterprises require. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance access to credit and minimize the adverse impact of the interest capping on credit while strengthening financial access and monetary policy effectiveness, I propose to amend the Banking Amendment Act 2016 by repealing Section 33B of the said Act. This is to enable banks and other lenders to provide more credit, especially to the borrowers they consider riskier. Mr. Speaker, in order to sustainably deal with the inadequacies in the consumer protection and unregulated lending in the financial sector, we have developed a Financial Market Conduct Bill 2018 that comprehensively addresses these issues and does away with piecemeal and fragmented legislation on consumer credit. The bill also addresses the problem of predatory lending and reckless behavior by credit providers, exploitation of consumers by debt collectors, lending without regard to the borrower's ability to repay, leading to high levels of indebtedness, deceptive pricing, and abusive collective techniques. Mr. Speaker, the draft Financial Market Conduct Bill 28 is currently undergoing stakeholder consultation before Cabinet considers it in due course. Mr. Speaker, other ongoing initiatives include digitalization of land titling processes, development of the functional collateral registry to support provision of affordable credit to Kenya businesses and individuals, and implementation of the Treasury Mobile Direct and Emakiba to offer retail individuals alternative savings mechanism, thus indirectly compelling formal financial services providers to offer competitive savings rate. Mr. Speaker, the aforementioned reforms will not only address shortcomings in the credit market, but it will also catalyze provision of credit to support the government Big Four plan. Mr. Speaker, the next part of my statement focuses on proposed amendment to various acts which mainly targets the financial sector. On the capital markets, Mr. Speaker, the capital markets plays a critical role in our economy and facilitate investment growth in the country. In this context, our capital markets require progressive regulatory framework to enhance investor confidence as well as regulate players in the financial sector. Therefore, I propose to amend the Capital Markets Act to introduce enhanced financial controls and provide for investor protection in the sector. In the Retirement Benefits Act, we have cases of some employers who have failed to remit pension contribution to their respective retirement benefit scheme. In order to compel employers to remit the pension contribution, I propose to amend the Retirement Benefit Act to enable the authority intervene against any employer who fails to remit such contribution to the scheme. Mr. Speaker, as you recall, in 2016, I introduced amendments to the Retirement Benefit Individual Retirement Benefit Scheme regulations and the Retirement Benefit Occupational Retirement Benefit Scheme regulations in order to provide for establishment of a medical fund into which members can contribute during their working life and the same be used to purchase medical cover upon retirement. To further promote this policy and support universal health care and the Big Four, I propose to introduce amendment to the same regulations to allow members who are unable to build medical funds during employment to utilize a portion of their retirement benefits for post-retirement medical cover. I further exempt the fund from the retirement benefit levy in order to boost the members' contribution. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya insurance sector has heavily relied on traditional indemnity-based insurance, which has had challenges due to the requirement for assessment of losses to be conducted before any payment is made. This has led to low uptake of agricultural insurance. In order to provide an alternative to the indemnity-based insurance, I propose to amend the Insurance Act to introduce index-based insurance, which will lead to higher uptake of insurance by our farmers. Further, Mr. Speaker, we have witnessed increased instances of insurance fraud in the insurance sector, mainly due to lack of adequate provisions to govern the sector. In this regard, I propose to amend the Insurance Act to introduce provisions to criminalize insurance fraud and protect the consumers. Mr. Speaker, the current provisions of the Insurance Act allows the insured to pay for premium insurance through an intermediary. The intermediaries delay the payment for the premium, thereby putting the insurance at risk. In order to ensure prompt payment of premium to the insurers and take into account the expanded mode of payment of premium through digital platform, I propose to amend the Insurance Act to require the insured to make payments in respect of premium direct to the insurer. This will enhance prompt coverage of the insured. Mr. Speaker, SACCO Societies Act and regulations require SACCO societies to submit periodic statutory reports and other information to the SACCO society regulatory authorities, mainly on monthly and quarterly basis. These statutory reports are critical components and tools for daily monitoring and evaluation of the financial performance of SACCO societies, such as their liquidity status, capital adequacy, and asset quality, among others. Mr. Speaker, the authority has been progressively adopting risk-based supervision model of supervision, which is the internationally accepted supervision model for financial institutions. The risk-based supervision is heavily dependent on the real-time and accurate data and other statistical information for the SACCO. I therefore propose to amend the SASRA Act to allow the usage of ICT in submission of the statutory reports. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker and fellow Kenyans, the last 2 years were difficult for our nation, but we remained resilient and emerged stronger as a democratic society. Our people have shown incredible patience and optimism. Our president has led the way to find common grounds and heal the wounds arising from divisive politics. Mr. Speaker, the budget I have presented to you has been carefully prepared to balance the difficult choices we had to make in order to move this country forward, implement our president's legacy agenda of radically transforming this country through the Big Four initiative, and sustain our public finances. I believe we have made the right decision that will propel this country to prosperity and make us great. Mr. Speaker, despite our limited resources and the need to reduce the fiscal deficit, we have, in addition to fund Big Four agenda, sustain the prioritization of resources to procure programs, especially in the areas of social protection, cash transfers, education, health, food security, access to electricity, and drought and disaster risk mitigation measures. The budget is also inclusive and promotes shared prosperity in light of resources allocated to ASAL areas and transfers to counties, National Constituency Development Fund, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, and the Equalization Fund. Mr. Speaker, let this budget and the subsequent ones be the beginning of revitalization and finding